The Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum was built to be a progressive place of medicine and recovery, but over the years, it became a place of death and torment. It is said that many souls still haunt the long-abandoned premises, and is considered the most haunted asylum in the United States. In 1858, construction began on a new mental hospital in Weston, West Virginia. It would be named the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum. The new mental health facility was built with the ideals of a contemporary progressive reformers behind it. This meant that the hospital was supposed to be a new age treatment facility that gave comfort and healing to the patients, rather than the typical prison-like structures that had previously been the standard. To understand the need for a new type of hospital like the one in Weston, you must understand how the world viewed the insane hundreds of years ago. Since colonists first began to arrive in the New World, they brought with them the idea that the insane were possessed by the devil. With possession came many historical purges of the mentally ill, including the Salem witch trials. For most of the 1700s, the mentally ill were shoved by their families into dark corners of their homes, like the cellar or closet. They were sent there to rot in the dark. With the turn of the century, the 1800s brought much needed change to this barbaric treatment of the mentally ill. The change was sparked by the work of Dorothy Dix, who spent her whole life fighting for the ethical and humane treatment of the insane and mentally ill. Because of Dorothy's work, governments were forced to start giving funds to programs that would help the mentally ill and treat them like human beings. So, with this influx of money, people like Thomas Kirkbride were able to test their progressive ideas. Dr. Kirkbride had come up with the new idea of, quote, moral treatment for the insane. His idea was unique to the United States and became the standard for 71 hospitals in the mid to late 19th century. Dr. Kirkbride's idea of humane treatment for the insane was groundbreaking. Before his ideals spread across the country, the mentally ill were sent to prisons, where they were often chained naked to the floor in a dark dungeon for their entire lives. Dr. Kirkbride saw no medical value in this technique, so he began implementing what he called his moral treatment to patients. This all started with how a mental hospital should be constructed, and the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum would be the first mental hospital to be built with Kirkbride's ideas in mind. You would easily recognize Kirkbride's hospital designs from old movies. His plans first need a piece of land out in a rural area. The actual buildings are constructed in a large but shallow V shape. His designs call for long, rambling wings that provide patients with as much sunlight and fresh air as possible. He hoped this new type of facility would provide patients with sufficient activities and a setting that could provide potential relief and even healing. Kirkbride's plan, as it was called, influenced over 300 facilities nationwide. But as the 20th century rolled around, those in the medical field no longer believed in Kirkbride's plan, so his buildings were left to rot. But Kirkbride's moral treatment for the insane didn't stop at a simple building. No, it went further into the lives of the patients. He thought that patients should be able to roam the grounds for as long as they wanted. He was a firm believer that if these people could gain a little control and responsibility in their lives, then they could improve. While the science behind this might not have been solid, at least the patients would be treated humanely. Before this New Age hospital could be built, however, the Civil War had begun. Only partially completed at the time, the hospital was about to be the centerpiece of a dramatic event. With all non-war activities brought to a halt on the heels of Virginia's secession from the Union, the scene was set in Weston, West Virginia. At 5 a.m. on the morning of June 30th, 1861, residents of the town of Weston were woken by Union soldiers marching. The troops, led by Colonel Erastus Tyler, began searching for Confederate sympathizers, but this was just a cover for his real mission. His real mission was to steal gold from the Weston Bank of Virginia so that it couldn't be used to fund the rebellion. Interestingly, the $30,000 in gold the bank held, which was worth $500,000 in today's money, was meant to pay the wages and costs for the asylum that was under construction. As if that wasn't demoralizing enough for the people of Weston, the Union turned the half-constructed insane asylum into Camp Tyler, an important military post in the war for the next 3 years. In 1864, when the Union Army finally left, they would steal all the clothing and food save for the first batch of patients in Weston. Later in 1864, the hospital was finally completed and opened its doors. It opened its doors with a new name, Weston State Hospital. Weston State Hospital is believed to be the largest hand-cut stone masonry building in the United States, and only second in the world to the Kremlin. Weston State Hospital, congruent with Dr. Kirkbride's plans, would house 250 patients. Each patient would have his or her comfortable room. Natural light and air regularly flowed through the hospital's halls in hopes of helping the patients. In addition to the hospital buildings themselves, the grounds contained over 600 acres and included a working farm, a dairy herd, a water reservoir, and an ice plant. The hospital was self-sufficient and hoped that this self-sufficiency would make patients feel more at home. Weston State Hospital, despite everything, got off on the right foot. But this wouldn't last too long, as by the time the 1930s rolled around, the asylum was overcrowded and overrun. At one point, the hospital housed 2,400 patients, almost 10 times what it was built to hold. You can imagine the problems about to occur. The patients inside were now running wild, as the orderlies were vastly outnumbered. In 1935, patients set fire to the 4th floor of the building, destroying it completely. Another incident occurred where 2 patients tried to kill another with bed sheets. When they failed, they bashed his head in with a metal bed frame. As if that wasn't bad enough, a nurse would go missing, and her body would be found 2 months later at the bottom of an unused staircase. These incidents, along with the continued overcrowding, caused the media to begin looking into the treatment of the patients at Weston State Hospital. While the Charleston Gazette has reported on the terrible conditions several times during the 20th century, it was a 1949 study conducted by the Weston Hospital Revitalization Committee that caused a stir. They found that the asylum looked like a hog pen and smelled even worse. They claimed that it was dirty and unkempt, and that patients were naked and confined to unsanitary conditions. In 1994, the hospital was finally closed. The building Dr. Kirkbride hoped would heal was now abandoned and rotting itself. Many people believe that the former hospital is haunted by the souls of the former patients. Visitors report seeing ghostly figures walking through the hallways at night and balls of light floating through the air. The most famous ghost story at Weston is the story of Lily, a patient of the hospital who died at the age of 9. Her room on the 4th floor is still filled with toys, as if she's waiting for someone to play with her. The dolls and balls reportedly move on their own, while a music box turns on at random. Today, the asylum is a tourist attraction where you can not only see the conditions that patients lived in, but potentially see the ghosts of those who never left. With its new life as a tourism destination, it was given back its original name, the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum.